there. Joining us now at ArenaBowl XXVI, we have an incredibly special guest, one of the first truly great quarterbacks in AFL history. We have James Guidry here. James, thank you so much for taking the time out for us. So let's talk about some old school football. Let's go back in the early 90s. You were dealing with Dallas, then you went to Anaheim, you went all over the place. Take us through those beginning stages of your career.
Well, I actually was in Europe and came back home, wanted to play in the United States when my family got an opportunity to see me play. And the opportunity, I was not going to play in the NFL at that time. But the NFL was an opportunity for you to use as a stepping stone to get to the NFL. Once you get to organized football, you play against top-rate talent out there, and you have opportunity to excel and go to the next level. I started off my career in a great program there with the Detroit Drives, with Tim Markman was the head coach there, and Jerry Trice was the assistant. That's how I got discovered through Jerry Trice. As a matter of fact, I really got discovered through Mouse Davis, who actually started the original run and shoot with the New Jersey Knights of the World League Football. We actually started way back before then, but I saw him in Barcelona when they had the exhibition games, when Arena used to go to Europe and play in France and play in Barcelona. I was already living in Barcelona, and Mouse Davis asked me, how do you like to play this game? I said, I would love to. And the rest was history. Jerry Trice brought me back over to the United States, ended up with the Detroit Drives in '92, and then '93 ended up with with the Dallas Texans when Jerry Trice got the head coaching job there. And then I decided in '94 and '95 to stay in Europe and not to come back here to the United States. And after '95, I completed my career over in Europe, came back here, and then '96, Mike Trigg signed me with the Milwaukee Mustangs for the first 4 games. Then Clint Dozell came in, and he ended up getting the backup job to Todd Hamill, who was the starting quarterback there with the Milwaukee Mustangs. And I ended up staying around, but at the last 2 weeks of the season, Will McClay from the Florida Bobcats called me and said, well, Fred McNair went down last night, we need a quarterback. So Jim Jensen flew me down with the Florida Bobcats. I ended up playing the last 2. Terry Dean was the quarterback. And that's why they flew me down there. And not trying to take anything away from Terry Dean. He was a great college quarterback, but something happened to him along the way where he lost his drive. And Jim Jensen flew me in. I ended up starting the last game of the season against the St. Louis Stampede. Beat John Kaleo and that group with Dave Urick was the head coach then, because the former head coach from Ohio State decided to step down, and then Dave Urick took over the position with St. Louis. And we ended up beating them. They were a playoff team. We ended up beating them. So I got a strong look to come back to play with Florida Bobcats. But Will McClay took a job with Anaheim and Mike Hornsey. And he left Florida, and he called me and told me, well, I'm in Anaheim. I'd like to have you here. And they worked out a deal for me to come to Anaheim. So I didn't go back to Florida to play with the Bobcats. Ended up in Anaheim. But before I got on the flight to go to Anaheim, Hornsey traded me to Albany. So I went to Albany, New York, where Mike Daly was. Mike Daly there. We had Mike Falowski there. You had Frank was the quarterback. He used to play at the University of Miami. Frank, I can't think of his last name. He was in camp with us. We had Jerry Colquitt from University of Tennessee, quarterback. That's the type of talent you had back in the day. Division I talent, future NFL prospects that were playing in the Arena Football League. And not taking away from anything from the talent currently, but you didn't have that level of guys. Mike Falowski out of the University of Cal playing in the Arena Football League when he's supposed to be in an NFL camp somewhere. And he was the next up and coming to John Elway. Mm-hmm. He was the John Elway of the Arena Football at that time. So I decided I didn't want to stay in Albany as a practice quarterback. I'm a veteran, so I don't want to do it. I decided to go back to Texas. But Mike Daly was a character coach. I don't care if anybody has anything different to say about him. He's a stand-up guy, a stand-up character. I like Mike Daly. He had lost his mother, and I pulled him aside and talked to him and said, I'm going to be praying for you and your family. And Mike Daly's words to me was like, James, I really respect a guy like you. I heard a lot about you. And I said, yeah, well, I just wanted to go home because I didn't want to be on the practice squad. He said, well, let me do something for you, James, because I heard a lot about you and all the players call about the character type of guy you are. And I said, well, hey, whatever you do, that's fine, but I'm going back home. I'm not going to play anymore. Traded me back to Anaheim, where I was originally traded from. And so I get to Anaheim, you have Lee Williamson from Presbyterian, quarterback there, Ron Lopez from Utah State is there. Mark Grebe from UC Davis.
Before anybody knew about him, yeah.
Yeah, he was his rookie then.
Mm-hmm.
And then you had myself, and there was one other quarterback. But they ended up bringing up John Kaleo later on in that year. But you had all that type of talent on that team, and Will McClay was the defensive coordinator. I retired during that season because of the politics in it all. I knew I was, if not the best quarterback, the second best. Because Mark came in and did an excellent job until he tore his knee up. And then Hornsey had to play me the last game of the season. And the last game of the season, I'll never forget that night. 6 touchdowns in the air, 1 on the ground for 25 plus yards, 2 two-pointers, 383 yards passing. That had never happened in Anaheim's history. And guess who was part owner of the team during that year?
Dave Baker.
Dave Baker. And at the end of the year, he decided to take the interview to become the commissioner of the Arena Football League at that time. So fast forward, I decided I wasn't going to play. I retired, went back to college and coach. You looked in the USA Today paper in January, my name goes into a dispersal draft because I was going to get offered a coaching job with Hornsey. He was going to bring me back to coach, but they didn't have a team in Anaheim. So I go to Portland, play in 1998. I had to sustain an injury. We were 3-0 out the back. People don't remember that. We started off 3-0 out the back. Well, no, we lost to Albany the first year. Then we won the next 3. So we were 3-1, and I had a hip injury. It sort of hampered my performance. Then we didn't win any more games after that. But I had my roommate and teammate at the time was Aronde Gaston, like I mentioned to you before. At the end of the season that year, Aronde goes to camp with Jimmy Johnson because he was with Jimmy Johnson with the Cowboys before in the 90s. And then in 98, Jimmy Johnson brings him to Miami, and that's where he ended up his career. 99, we fast forward to the next year. ESPN had reported that I was the most prolific quarterback in the Arena Football League that year. And that was at the beginning of the season. The first 3 games of the year, or the first 2 games of the year, the first game of the year I throw 8 touchdowns. The next game of the year, the next game was against the Nashville Cats, playing against James Barron, who's playing with them at the time, and I throw 4 touchdowns. We ended up losing. But the next game in San Jose is when my life just really, really changed. And I talk about all these old guys who played in the league, from Cedric Bonner to Aaron Garcia to Mike Perez to Mike Pawlowski, Freddie McNair, and all those guys who played in. Even Tom Luginbill, who's now on the ESPN panel for college sports. Tom Luginbill was in Florida, and when he came, he was quarterback with the Florida Bobcats because they had Clemente Gordon from Grambling was a starting quarterback. And everybody knew Tom Luginbill was better than Clemente Gordon. And after that game, I told Tom, hey man, just hang in there. You'll get your chance. You get your chance. But 1999, playing against San Jose, I'm breaking records, and 55 seconds left in the game against San Jose. We're down by 21 points. 3rd and 10 in their end zone, in the open end zone down there. That's when I had a neck injury. Sustained a neck injury, was instantly paralyzed, stopped breathing on the field. Life had expired. John Fryer had just hired a neurologist that night for the first time in that arena history. And Mike Adam was the neurologist there. And he was the only one that be able to identify what was going on with me at that time, and he helped to save my life. And so from that point forward is when we started to organize the players. While I was in the hospital recovering, they were organizing. And the history about the Arena Football League Players Association started then, on that night. But coaches who played in the old school football, Arena Football League, it'll get back. I honestly feel like Arena Football would get back to that level, like it was back in the late 80s, early 90s, that whole era, and even in the 2000s.